First, the iPhone Air is actually the first iPhone with a Pro chip that only supports USB 2.0 transfer speed.
Maybe you need a little more air.
Second, the iPhone Air is actually not as light as people imagine. With a 165 grams of weight, it's similar to iPhone 12. Third, on Apple's EU website, it shows that the iPhone Air's battery capacity is 3,149 mAh. According to Apple, the battery life of the iPhone Air is actually longer than last year's iPhone 16. Fourth, there's no cinematic mode for video recording on the iPhone Air. That's for both the back and the front cameras. Fifth, the iPhone Air is using an updated in-house modem, Apple C1X, but it still doesn't support millimeter wave. Sixth, for this year's models, the iPhone 17 has 8 gigs of RAM. The rest of them all have 12 gigs. Seventh, even though they look similar, the iPhone 17 is actually larger and heavier than last year's iPhone 16. In fact, it's the thickest and heaviest regular model since iPhone 11. Eighth, the pricing of the iPhone 17 actually makes it the most value iPhone model this year. It still has the same starting price, even though the base model now has 256 gigs of storage instead of 128. Ninth, the screens on the 17 Pro and Pro Max are pretty similar with last year's. The only difference is the boosted brightness under sunlight. 10th, for this year's models, the MagSafe charging speed are pretty similar compared with last year's models. They are going to be capped at 25 watt with a 30 watt adapter, so feel free to use last year's MagSafe charger. 11th, the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max are the thickest iPhones in 12 years. The last iPhone that is thicker than those two was the iPhone 5C back in 2013. Also, this year's iPhone 17 Pro is one of the heaviest Pro model since the first Pro model released in 2019. It has the same weight as the iPhone 14 Pro, but the 17 Pro Max is not the heaviest Pro Max. The 14 Pro Max still holds the record. 12th, according to Apple's numbers, this year's 17 Pro and Pro Max have larger bezels compared with last year's 16 Pro and Pro Max. 13th, the telephoto lens on the 17 Pro and Pro Max now have 4x zoom instead of last year's 5x, but you can now get 8x lossless zoom by sensor cropping. 14th, there's still no 8K video recording on 17 Pro and Pro Max, and just like last year, the 4K 120 FPS is only available on the main camera. 15th, the 17 Pro and Pro Max now supports an updated Apple Lock 2. According to Apple, it provides a wider color gamut. 16th, for this year's Apple Watch Series 11, it actually uses the same S10 chip with last year's Series 10. So it looks like Apple stopped rebranding their old chip to a new chip, just like S9 and S10. 17th, this year's two new health features on the Apple Watch, the hypertension detection and sleep score, are not exclusive for this year's new models. For the hypertension detection, it will be available on Series 9 and later, and Ultra 2 and later. For the sleep score feature, it will be available on Series 6 and later, all Ultra models, and SE2 and later. If you found this video useful, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe for the new iPhone reviews. Have a nice day!